She didn't just steal my legacy, she used my love for her son to do it. For 50 years. The recipe for my grandmother's brioche had been the quiet center of my world. A tradition passed down through worn pages and the feel of the dough beneath my fingers. My son, David, saw that legacy not as art, but as an asset waiting to be liquidated. He thought that because I was nearing 70, I was senile. A weak, low-tech obstacle. He didn't know that my quiet life had given me time to anticipate his greed. Nor did he know that the secret to the bread was never written down. I let him take the ledger. I let him walk away with what he thought was a $250,000 payday. I let him. Because the book was a decoy. And the real weapon was the 30 pounds of muscle memory in my hands. The smell of burnt sugar was supposed to be comforting. Instead, it was a sharp, metallic tang in the air. A scent that had been replacing the warm yeast and butter in my kitchen for the last 6 months. It signaled David's financial panic, the escalating gambling debt that was choking his life. He walked in, not with the frantic desperation of a man who needed help, but with the cloying, fake concern of a practiced actor. "Mom," he said, pulling out a kitchen chair with a theatrical scrape. He didn't bother to kiss me. "You look exhausted." "Really?" "You do. I worry about you out here all alone." I had been kneading dough for an hour, the rhythmic motion grounding me. I stopped, wiping my hands on my apron. I kept my back straight and my voice even. "I'm fine. David, I'm 68. I haven't forgotten how to turn on the mixer." He waved away the insult, moving to his pre-rehearsed script. "Of course not. Mom. But this is important." I was reading that local blog again. "The one that called your brioche a forgotten American classic." He named the dish. "But not the effort. It just makes me think. You need to preserve this legacy. You need to protect it." He produced a small, silver thumb drive, holding it up like a holy relic. "I want to take your old recipe book, the heavy, stained one, and digitize it for you. Put it on the cloud. So it's safe. So it's forever." He knew exactly what he was doing. He was presenting the theft of my legacy as an act of filial care. He saw the book, stained with 40 years of sweat, tears, and proofing failures, as the source of my power, and he was offering to save it so he could steal it. I remembered the last time he'd offered to help me with my legacy. It was 2 years ago, and I needed $5,000 for a new, specialty oven that would perfectly regulate the proofing temperature, the key to the brioche. I remembered the sacrifice. I had liquidated 2 rare gold coins that my late husband had left me. Those coins were the last remaining portion of my retirement fund. $23,000 I was supposed to live on. I handed over the money, trusting my son. He called my dream kitchen a money pit. I thought, the memory cutting through the yeast-scented air. He said, "Why are you wasting $23,000 on an old house?" "Mom, just buy a cheap oven." I was liquidating my retirement fund to invest in my passion, in my art, in our home. I remembered the deception. David had praised me with the most vile flattery. "You're too good for this world." "Mom, too pure. You focus on your art. I'll handle the dirty business of money." The vile contrast was immediate and brutal. While I was draining my retirement fund to invest in a machine that would perfect the family recipe, David was using the $5,000 I'd given him the week before to take a weekend trip to Vegas, gambling away the very money I'd worked 50 years for. And he did so while simultaneously telling me my investment was frugal and a waste. That moment, the moment I saw the credit card statement, was my breaking point. My endurance wasn't based on senility. It was based on a promise to my late husband. "George, take care of David. He's impulsive. You're his rock." I looked at David now, holding his thumb drive, his eyes cold and calculating beneath the facade of concern. I realized my husband hadn't asked me to be a rock. He'd asked me to be a human shield. David would only stop when he hit a wall, and that wall had to be solid, irrefutable, and built of consequences. My endurance stopped. The battle started. "That's very thoughtful. David, I said, my voice steady. But that old book, it's not in the kitchen. It's in my study. I walked to the small, mahogany desk in the corner. I unlocked the heavy, ironclad filing cabinet. I pulled out the book. It was exactly as he remembered, thick. Parchement page. The cursive script faded. The margins smeared with decades of flour and butter. As I handed it to him, my internal monologue was my resolve. I was cold, analytical, a trap setter. He took the list of words. He thinks he has the language of the bread. He forgot that the real language is spoken by the hands, and I never taught him that vocabulary. David took the book. His fingers trembled slightly, not with sentiment, but with the anticipation of $250,000. He quickly slipped it into his leather briefcase, the motion clumsy and arrogant. Thank you, Mom, he said, not meeting my eyes. This is huge. For us, I'll bring the thumb drive back tomorrow. Now, you get some rest. I'll take care of the heavy lifting. He grabbed his keys and rushed out, leaving the rich, heavy perfume of his expense account cologne in his wake. He was gone in 30 seconds. He didn't see me walk back to the desk. He didn't see me open the bottom drawer and pull out a smaller pot of lard, toucaner and a newer spiral-bound notebook. This notebook contained 2 pages of notes. It wasn't about ingredients. It was a precise log of the 3-stage proofing process, the unwritten, 24-hour dance of temperature and humidity that gave the brioche its soul. It detailed the exact moment the dough had to be moved from the cool basement 55 degrees Fahrenheit to the warm pantry 78 degrees Fahrenheit, and finally to the counter 68 degrees Fahrenheit before the bake. He took the book of ingredients. He took the decoy. The real weapon, my decades of useless skill, was still right here. I calmly wrote a single sentence on the first clean page of the notebook. It was a prediction and a promise. The launch date is imminent. The product will taste like cardboard. The local food blogger, a young woman named Chloe, called me exactly 1 week later. David had successfully closed the deal. Evelyn, I'm calling to say congratulations, she chirped, her voice bright and professional. I'm doing a piece on Artisan Bake Corp, and they let slip that the Hayes brioche line is launching next month. That's wonderful news I've been saying for years. You deserve this scale of recognition. I sat in my kitchen, stirring a pot of cream for a simple custard. My hands perfectly still. My breathing remained even. David had been right about one thing I was enduring, but not out of senility. I was enduring to let the trap set deep. Oh, my dear, I said, pitching my voice to sound exactly as David thought. I was a little surprised, a little forgetful. The Hayes brioche line. I'm afraid I don't follow. The momentary confusion on the other end was audible. Oh, I'm so sorry. Evelyn, I was told it was based on your famous brioche recipe. They said your son, David, was handling all the legacy details. I had my proof. The attack was complete. David had taken the book, sold my half-century of work, and attached the family name to the fraud. He had successfully secured his financial freedom by selling the one thing I was sworn to protect: my legacy. I remembered the exact moment I saw the paperwork, confirming his descent into ruin. It was 10 years ago. David had been caught trying to embezzle funds from his failing investment firm. It was a scandal that threatened to put him in jail. I remembered the sacrifice. I had flown to the Caymans, liquidated the only true safe harbor my late husband, George, had left me, and paid $50,000 in quiet reparations to the firm's victims. George had told me the account was for my health, my final security. I emptied it for David. I recalled the deception he'd used to convince me this was necessary. He had sworn, tearfully, that this was his only mistake. They'll destroy me. Mom, they'll take my whole life. You're my rock, my only chance. I'm giving up gambling. I swear on Dad's grave. I'll pay you back. I just need you to trust me one last time. The vile contrast was immediate and chilling. While I was emptying my secret health account, a lifeline I had promised George to keep sacred, David was using the $2,000 I'd given him for his flight home to purchase a high-end, limited edition collector's watch. He needed the watch, he claimed, to look the part for his new, reformed life. He used the product of my ultimate financial sacrifice to purchase the symbol of his arrogance. And all the while, he told me that my frugality was silly and that money should be spent, not hoarded. I finished my conversation with the blogger, promising to be thrilled to see the launch. I then hung up the phone. I looked out the window. David was pulling up the driveway. He wasn't driving the 10-year-old sedan I'd bought him. He was in a glistening, crimson, $90,000 German sports car, the leather seats still smelling new. He was wearing a suit I knew cost more than my entire stove. He had spent the $250,000 advance in exactly 4 weeks. He sauntered into the kitchen, his whole demeanor radiating narcissistic rage. Only this time, the rage was masked by success. He was high on his own perceived cleverness. "Mom," I declared, pulling the book and thumb drive from his briefcase and dropping them onto the counter with a thud. "You don't need to play coy," Chloe called. "Didn't she? I saw her coming out of the Artisan Bake HQ." He went straight to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of imported beer. He did not ask if I wanted anything. "I gave them the book," he said, taking a long drink. "The contract is signed. The advance is in. $250,000. Mom, paid off my debts. Bought the car. And now I'm back in business. All thanks to your little hobby." He said little hobby with open contempt. A final. Cutting attack on my dignity. He was an absolute hypocrite to the core. He had just stolen my life's work, converted it into a massive, life-changing sum of money, and was simultaneously dismissing its value to my face. I walked to the stove and turned off the gas beneath the custard. I didn't look at the car, or the suit, or the beer. I looked at the old, stained recipe book on the counter. "David," I said quietly, my voice as calm as a winter lake. "I was reading that recipe earlier. There is a step, an instruction in the margin. That seems to be missing." He laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound. "Missing, Mom? It's a 100-year-old recipe. It's probably just yeast activation instructions. They have machines for that now. You worry too much about the details. It's the instruction about the 3-stage proofing process," I clarified, my eyes boring into his. The precise, 24-hour cycle of moving the dough between 3 exact temperatures to develop the final, nuanced flavor. His smile faltered. His eyes flickered. He remembered the long, confusing note he'd seen in the margin. A note he thought was meaningless. Old lady clutter. "It's not in the book," I continued. "I never wrote it down. It was a secret I kept in my hands. A thing I learned to feel." He stared at me, his confidence bleeding away. He had stolen the ingredients list. But he had left the soul of the bread on the table. He was cornered, and his narcissistic rage took over. "You deliberately. You sabotaged me," he hissed, his voice dropping to a terrifying snarl. "I gave you exactly what you asked for," I replied, pulling off my apron. "A family recipe." He lunged forward, grabbing the book. "This is fraud. You think I won't ruin you? I'll call Artisan Bake right now. I'll tell them you tried to set me up." I simply met his gaze. "I think, David," I said, a faint, cold smile touching my lips. "You should do that. After all, you told me yourself. You handle the dirty business of success. I just handle the details." I left him standing in my kitchen, a man who had just stolen a worthless piece of paper for a $250,000 advance, while the entire corporate world waited for the promised product. The press launch for the Hayes brioche line was scheduled for the following Tuesday. David, in his hubris, sent me a link to the live stream. He wanted me to watch. He didn't just want my money, he wanted my humiliation. He wanted me to see my legacy, my name, my dignity, converted into his public triumph. I spent Monday not calling a lawyer. I spent it in my kitchen. I did not consult the decoy book. I consulted my hands. I followed the real recipe, the one that lived in my muscle memory. I began the 3-stage proofing process. I moved the dough from the cool, 55-degree air of the basement pantry to the warm, 78-degree humidity of the linen closet, and finally, after 12 hours, to the 68-degree marble counter for the final fold. By Tuesday morning, my kitchen didn't smell like burnt sugar. It smelled of victory. My leverage wasn't a document. It was a simple wicker basket, filled with 6 loaves of golden enam. Perfect. Authentic brioche. I opened the live stream on my laptop. The event was a spectacle. Artisan Bake Corp had rented a ballroom. The CEO, a sharp-eyed man named Harrison, was on stage. David was beside him, wearing the $90,000 suit that my life's work had paid for. He looked every bit the devoted son, the savior of a lost art. "We aren't just selling bread," Harrison announced to the room of food critics and investors. "We are selling tradition. David Hayes has brought us his mother's sacred cardamom and of cardamom. Rustic legacy." They unveiled the product. They passed samples on silver trays. I watched the live stream. I saw the first food critic, Chloe, the blogger who had called me take a bite. Her smile froze. She did not chew. She reached for her water. I saw another critic, a man from the Times, discreetly spit his mouthful into a linen napkin. It was happening. The cardboard had landed. Harrison, the CEO, sensing the shift in the room, looked furious. David saw his entire $250,000 future evaporating. He grabbed the microphone. This was his attack. "Ladies and gentlemen," David stammered, his voice tight with panic. It seems there's a technical failure with the ovens. A discrepancy." He looked at the critics, his face a mask of practiced pity. "My mother, Evelyn," he said, and I watched him weaponize my age. "She is 68. She's not always herself these days. I fear, in her confusion, she may have accidentally given me an older, compromised version of the recipe. She gets vindictive when she's confused." He had done it. He had publicly attacked my mind. He had used my age as his shield, painting me as a senile, forgetful woman who had sabotaged her own son. As I watched David blame my confusion, I remembered the sacrifice. I remembered the 30 years I spent perfecting that 3-stage proofing. It wasn't just a recipe. It was my health. I remembered the burns that cover my left forearm. From when the old oven door collapsed in 1992, I remembered working 18-hour days to refine a technique he was now calling a mistake. I remembered the deception. My late husband, George, tasting that first perfect loaf. "This is magic. Evie," he'd whispered, "this is our legacy. This is the foundation of our family." The vile contrast was immediate. While I was sacrificing my physical health, working those 18-hour days to build that family foundation, David was using that foundation as a shield, to cover his own incompetence, while simultaneously insulting the very memory of the father who praised it. The expectation in the ballroom was palpable. The press and the CEO looked at David with pity, and at the empty space where I was supposed to be, with contempt. I was the senile old woman who had ruined everything. That's when the camera panned to the back of the room. I had arrived 15 minutes earlier, invited by Chloe. I wasn't carrying a briefcase. I wasn't flanked by lawyers. I was carrying my simple wicker basket, covered by a clean linen cloth. I walked to the stage. David's face went white. Harrison stepped in front of me, his expression pure contempt. "Mrs. Hayes, your son tells us you're unwell. You need to leave." This was the twist. "I'm quite well, Mr. Harrison," I said. I placed my basket on the podium. I pulled back the cloth. The smell of the real brioche, warm, buttery, complex, filled the air. It was a physical presence, The press surged forward. Cameras, flashing. This, I said, my voice calm and clear, holding up one of the corporation's dense, gray bricks, is what happens when you use industrial machines and chemical agents to rush a process that takes 24 hours. Then, I broke open one of my own loaves. The steam rose in a perfect framsaz. Fragrant cloud. And this, I said, is what happens when you have 50 years of practice. This was the payoff. Chloe, the blogger, was the first to take a piece. Her eyes widened. The CEO, Harrison, grabbed a piece. He tasted it. He closed his eyes. He looked at the gray brick his company had just spent $1 million developing. Then he looked at David. It wasn't just bread. It was proof. David is right, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. The recipe book I gave him was incomplete. He took my list of ingredients. He did not take my hands. Harrison didn't look at me. He looked only at David. His face was purple with rage. Security, he hissed, his voice shaking. Get this. Parazici. Off my stage. Now. And call our legal team. David was publicly ruined. He was dragged out of the ballroom. His $90,000 suit rumpled. His reputation incinerated. He was facing a lawsuit for fraud from Artisan Bake Corp. He had lost his money. And now he had lost his name. David was ruined. But a ruined man is a desperate one. He had lost the lawsuit before it even began. Artisan Bake Corp, armed with the unanimous testimony of every food critic in that room, had filed an injunction, freezing the $250,000 he had already spent. The crimson sports car was repossessed. The new suit was seized. He was not just broke, he was in a catastrophic financial hole, facing a fraud charge that carried jail time. His public humiliation at the launch had been total. His name was toxic. His reputation was gone. He had nothing left to lose, which made him infinitely more dangerous. He couldn't attack the bread. The bread was my victory. He couldn't attack my mind. I had proven my clarity. So, he pivoted. He launched a scorched earth attack. He went after the one thing left that gave me joy, my kitchen. The attack came on a Friday morning, 2 days after the launch. A man from the county health department arrived, his face grim, holding a clipboard. "Ma'am," he said, not unkindly, "we've received a highly detailed, anonymous complaint. Allegations of a severe rodent infestation, improper food storage, and, forgive me, senile neglect of basic hygiene." This was David's masterpiece of cruelty. He had used specific, plausible lies designed to trigger an immediate shutdown. He was attacking my legacy and my dignity. He was trying to have my kitchen, my sanctuary, legally condemned. I looked at the inspector, and I remembered the fire. It was 15 years ago. A faulty wire in the wall had turned my kitchen into a pit of ash and soot. It was the only time in my life I had almost given up. I remembered the sacrifice. I had spent 8 months rebuilding it, not with contractors, but with my own 2 hands. I had laid the tile, plastered the walls, and installed the ovens. I remembered working 18-hour days, my hands raw and bleeding, my lungs aching from the dust. That kitchen wasn't just a room. It was a physical manifestation of my will to survive. I remembered the deception. David, then 25, had been furious. "Why are you doing this? Mom, just take the insurance money and let's move. This is stupid. You're obsessed." He wanted the $10,000 insurance check for a down payment on a condo. The vile contrast was a scar on my memory. While I was covered in soot, sacrificing my physical health to rebuild the heart of our home, David was trying to steal the insurance money so he could buy a bachelor pad, while simultaneously calling my life's work stupid and obsessive. He had tried to profit from its destruction then, and he was trying to destroy it for profit now. The expectation was clear. The inspector and David, who I had no doubt was watching from his car down the street, expected to find the kitchen of a confused 68-year-old woman, a little cluttered, a little disorganized. easy to condemn. This was the twist. An infestation, I said, my voice perfectly calm. I stepped aside. Please, come in. You must do your job. The inspector walked into my kitchen. He stopped. He looked around. His grim expression faded, replaced by one of genuine confusion. The kitchen wasn't just clean. It was surgically clean. The steel was polished. The floors were immaculate. This, he said, tapping his clipboard, does not match the report. I understand, I said. I walked to the small desk where I kept my records. David thought my hobby was baking. He was wrong. My hobby was meticulous. Obsessive record-keeping. I pulled out a thick, 3-ring binder. Perhaps this will help, I said. These are my logs. I opened the binder. Here is the daily temperature log for the walk-in freezer and the refrigerator. Recorded 3 times a day for the past 5 years. Here are the sanitizing schedules for all surfaces. Signed and dated. And here, I said, flipping to the last section, is the Integrated Pest Management Report from the company that inspects this property monthly. Their last visit was 2 days ago. We were given a perfect score. The inspector stared at the logs. He looked at me. His eyes no longer filled with pity, but with respect. He knew, instantly, what this was. This was the payoff. He didn't even bother with the inspection. He simply signed the bottom of his form. Mrs. Hayes, I am so sorry to have wasted your time. Your kitchen is one of the cleanest establishments in this county. I am noting this complaint as malicious, false, and harassing. He handed me the carbon copy of the perfect score. As I walked him to the door, I leaned in, my voice trembling with practiced, concern. Officer, I whispered. I am so embarrassed. I think this might have been my son, David, ever since his public failure at the artisan bake launch. He's been so confused. He's forgetful. He's been saying such vindictive things. I'm so worried about his stability. I had just used David's own attack directly against him. I had just planted the seed, in an official county record, that he was the one who was senile and unstable. I watched the inspector walk to his car, down the street. A dark set in. The last car David owned, peeled out from the curb and sped away. His attack had failed. He was now facing a fraud suit. And I had just created a paper trail suggesting he was mentally unfit. He was completely cornered. He had no money, no allies, and no legal recourse. He came that night, just as I knew he would. His failed health department attack had left him nowhere else to go. He was a cornered animal, bankrupt, facing a lawsuit, and officially noted in a county report as unstable. He had lost every weapon but violence. The sound of his fist on my front door wasn't a knock, it was an explosion. I smelled the whiskey on him before I even opened it. He shoved past me. Stumbling into the kitchen he had tried to condemn. You, he hissed. His voice a low growl. You witch. His $90,000 suit was stained. His eyes were bloodshot. He was unrecognizable. You did this. He spat. And with a roar, he swept a rack of my cooling brioche, the very bread that had saved my legacy, onto the floor. I had $250,000, he screamed. I had a future, you and your stupid, worthless bread. He lunged, towering over me, his face inches from mine. This was the expectation. He expected me to flinch. He expected me to cower. He expected the senile, confused old woman to finally break and offer him money to make the monster go away. I did not move. My back remained straight. I was prepared for this. This was the moment I had been waiting for since I'd paid off his Cayman Islands debt. My leverage wasn't my baking. It was his predictability. And it was the small, gray fabric speaker sitting on the counter. A gift from my granddaughter. David, in his arrogance, had always dismissed it as a stupid toy. He didn't understand technology. and he certainly didn't respect my ability to use it. As he raised his hand, I spoke, my voice perfectly calm, cutting through his rage. This was the twist. "Alexa," I said, "what is the weather tomorrow?" The small blue light on the speaker illuminated. "Tomorrow in your area, the weather will be..." David, blinded by his own rage, didn't even notice. He was too consumed by his own failure. "Weather," he shrieked. "You're worried about the weather. I am going to burn this place to the ground. You owe me." "Mom," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You think I'm stupid? I know you sabotaged me. You gave me the fake book. I needed the confession. I needed the final, irrefutable proof." "David," I said, my voice cold, "I gave you the ingredients. You were the one who told the corporation you were a genius." This was the payoff. "I am a genius," he shrieked, the sound raw and cracking. "I deserved that. $250,000 I earned it. I sold the recipe, yes, and I'd do it again. You think I care about this house?" He grabbed a can of lighter fluid from under the sink. "One I used for the barbecue. You're going to pay me what you cost me. Or I swear to God, I will burn this entire place down." He had done it. He had confessed to the fraud. He had confessed to the extortion. He had confessed to the intent to commit felony arson. And it was all captured on a $100 stupid toy. I looked at him. The son I had promised my dying husband to protect. I realized my promise was not to save David from the world. It was to save the world from David. The human shield was no longer needed. I spoke again, my voice clear. "Alexa, stop." The blue light went out. The file was already uploading to the cloud. David froze. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by his ragged breathing. He finally looked at the speaker. He looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "What? What did you do?" he whispered. "I did what you taught me to do." "David," I said, picking up my phone. "I preserved the legacy." The destruction was total. The police were there in 5 minutes. The audio file was irrefutable. They arrested him for felony criminal threats and extortion. Artisan Bake Corp., now armed with a felony confession of intent to defraud, won their civil suit in summary judgment. David was bankrupted, left with nothing but the stained suit he was arrested in. He was, of course, disowned. It's been 6 months. The trial is over. David is serving a sentence of 5 to 7 years. I didn't rebuild my life. I just continued it. The kitchen is quiet, but it is no longer just a hobby. Artisan Bake Corp., in a desperate move to save their reputation, approached me. They didn't want my recipe. They wanted my consulting. I am now a 69-year-old woman. I am also the new head of the Artisanal Integrity Division for the corporation. I didn't sell them my bread. I am teaching their bakers the technique. My useless skill is now my job title. Chloe, the blogger, is running the PR. We launched our first official, authentic Evelyn's Legacy pop-up last week. We sold out in 20 minutes. I looked at the check from the corporation. It was for $50,000. Not an advance. A paycheck. I remembered what David had told me. All those years ago, you just handle the art. Mom, I'll handle the dirty business of success. It turns out my art was the business. And my patience was the profit. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought your passion was just a hobby? Let me know in the comments when you realized your useless skill was actually your greatest strength.